Last week on Sailing Classea.
Part of this week's task was to figure out why the windlass had seized up on us.
Pretty much everything looked like that. It's all chewed up. It looks like it's a lot of damage.
This week we spent a lot of time working on our priorities. Whenever you're on a limited budget, you kind of have to pick and choose what you want to actually spend money on.
I bought this kayak back in 2007. So it's 10 years old now, and it's you can see that you can start to see the wear. So we're bought new handles and stuff to replace, make it look good again. Bought the matching plastic. We're gonna try to fix it up, get rid of it, and make some money.
Where are your cracks?
So they're all right underneath the handles. So right where the bolt went in. Got cracks there. Got a big one on that side. So find some plastic weld. Gonna try to figure this out.
A big one right there. So why do you drill a hole all the way through? Kind of like stops the crack.
Stops the crack from moving.
And then you're widening it so that the piping actually fits.
Right.
Do you mean to go all the way through?
Mm-hmm.
So you want to go all the way through?
Well, it was already all the way through anyways.
Tell us the good news.
Our insurance didn't go up nearly as much as we thought, which is good. Basically, what has to happen is we cannot pass 30.5 degrees north until after November 1st. Basically, we just have to wait till after hurricane season, and then we can go around Florida and over to Texas, which is good. And then we don't have to start paying a new premium until next July. So that's very good, because I know it's going to go up as soon as we hit Texas, and permanently docking in Texas, it's going to get more expensive than that.
Especially after Harvey.
Right. And so Monday, I'm going to call a couple of the marinas, see what kind of condition they're in, see if they'll be willing to take in a new vessel, and go from there.
Yay!
Unfortunately, when you own a boat, a lot of your time is spent researching. Unless you're a genius and know everything about boats already. But I am currently looking up things about batteries. Before we start talking about our battery issues, I want to go over some battery basics. Everything in this world is made up of atoms, seen on the left. The nucleus is made up of neutrons, which have no charge, and protons, which have a positive charge. The electrons are negatively charged and move around the nucleus. Now, electrons can be shared between atoms in a covalent bond, or atoms can give and receive electrons in ionic bonds. In ionic bonds, one atom will essentially want the electron more than the other atom. How does this pertain to batteries? Well, in typical batteries, The anode will have one material, and the cathode is a positive material that needs electrons more than the anode. The electrons will flow from the anode to the cathode. After the electrons have flowed to the cathode, the battery no longer has a charge. Its power has been used up. Rechargeable batteries are a little different than the typical batteries like AA or AAA, however. The electrolyte that connects the anode and cathode can drive electrons back to the anode in order for the battery to be used again. To explain this better, I'm going to use the two main types of rechargeable batteries used in the marine field as examples. For the lithium-ion batteries, the anode is made of carbon, the cathode is made of metal oxide, and the two are connected by an electrolyte with positively charged lithium ions. When the battery is being used to power something, the lithium ions are attracted to the metal oxide, and electrons are moved toward the metal oxide. When it is connected to a charger, the lithium ions are attracted toward the carbon anode, and electrons are able to flow back to the anode ready for another use. The other battery is the lead-acid battery. The anode is made of a sponge lead, while the cathode is made of lead oxide. The last important element is the sulfuric acid electrolyte. When the battery is being used, the sulfate and hydrogen from sulfuric acid separate. The sulfate binds to the lead, and the hydrogen binds to oxygen from the lead oxide, forming water. If the battery continues to run to the point that sulfate coats the lead plates too much, the battery could be damaged. When recharging, the sulfate rebinds with hydrogen to produce sulfuric acid, and the oxygen rebinds with lead to form lead oxide. Now, there are some major pros and cons differences between these two batteries. The lithium-ion batteries are a ton lighter, they're more environmentally friendly, and they live longer. So why don't we just buy lithium-ion batteries? They're also a hell of a lot more expensive. Today I'm working on the batteries. We have 3 different batteries on our boat, 1 for the engine and 2 for our home. And getting the batteries checked and fixed was one of our first priorities because we think one of the batteries might be going bad. In the last video we talked about how after an hour of running it without charging the batteries, one of the batteries drops down to 9 volts. And these are both 12-volt batteries. So there's an issue, and we are trying to figure out if that issue is with the battery, and therefore we need to replace the battery, or if it's just wiring, or possibly something else that we haven't thought of yet. So today I'm going to be testing the batteries out, seeing if there's a bad one. We do know that we have one good battery for sure, because that was required to be replaced before we purchased the boat. So we know one battery was replaced, but we need to figure out which battery that is and whether the other battery is bad or if there's something else going on. Now, these are really important. This was one of our top priorities because we have to have power whenever we're out. And depending on our setup, we might only be able to go out for a day and that's it. Because the batteries, you have to have a certain amount of power in them. And once that power drops to a certain level, you have to go back and recharge them or else your batteries could go bad. And so we're having to check our system, see if there's anything wrong, try to upgrade it so we can be out longer. And also at the same time, we're trying to figure out if we need to do solar power to keep charging those batteries, or if it would be just cheaper to go to the marinas, or if there's another alternative energy source, because you can also do wind or an alternator. So the alternator powers the battery whenever you have your motor on. So obviously the most ideal ones would be a wind or a solar because they're greener. You don't have to buy anything other than the initial purchase. And those would be good for long-term investments for our boat because then we wouldn't have to pay as much electricity once we're down to the marinas in Texas. I'm going to do the checks on the batteries, and to do that I have to get to them. I'm thinking this is probably the new one that got replaced. I don't think this one was replaced. So with any luck, hopefully this is the one that went bad, and that would make a lot of sense. I wanted to show you something that was going on. That was a little strange. Okay, so you can see the numbers, and when you go and press it on the terminal, sometimes you get 12.833, but if I move it, it'll give some crazy numbers. So that is incredibly low, but you know, it's going crazy, going wild, and then if I move somewhere else, right there, we're good again. So, well, my thought is, this is the older battery, I'm pretty sure. So I think it just needs to get a little sanded down. I think it's just a little corroded terminal. I'm going to sand it and see if that helps help us get better voltage. To clean the terminals, I made a baking soda solution. It's just 2 tablespoons of baking soda with 1 tablespoon of water made into a paste. And I rubbed it on the terminals. Make sure that you don't get this in any other parts of the battery because it can neutralize your acid, which makes the battery unusable. For really bad corrosion, you might have to sand parts of the terminals, or you could also use a terminal brush or a wire brush, just anything that will get the bigger chunks of corrosion off. After you get that solution on there and scrub a little bit, I waited a couple of minutes just to make sure it had enough time to react and eliminate that corrosion. Then take a damp cloth, not soaking, just damp, and rub that solution off. Again, make sure that the baking soda does not end up anywhere else in or on the battery to make sure that you don't accidentally neutralize that acid. And rub it all off, make sure that it's dry before you test it. After I did this, the battery sucked less. However, it did still suck, so we're going to have to replace the battery. We have one relatively new lead acid battery. Therefore, the best move for us is just to replace the bad battery. And you can't buy 1 lithium and 1 lead acid because their chemistry is different. And if you try to recharge them, they're not going to charge the same, and it causes a bunch of different problems. So you have to have one or the other. So if you replace one bad battery, you have to have it the exact same as the other battery that's already there. And unfortunately, that's our situation right now.